Good morning, Lone Australia recap number 5. I'm just at a nice beach on the kind of mid-north coast here. Thought I'd give you a different background for today. Let's kick off with Gina again because I think she's at the start. I really like her grass, swordgrass mat kind of weaving that she's doing for a door. That swordgrass is really tough to handle. It's very easy to cut yourself with that stuff, but once it's nice and safely in a door, it's a good building material. And I like the way that that's flexible. It's a pretty cool design. I like that. I thought it was funny how she's talking about the clothing, how she doesn't often wear a lot of clothes. So you can adapt to cold in the kind of long term by doing that. And in the southern tip of South America, there's the Yamana people that lived south of Tierra del Fuego near Cape Horn. And they were really adapted to cold, not necessarily evolutionary adapted, but the human body has access to different ways of expressing its genes. So it's different to Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, where he said basically if you are born with a certain set of genes and they express, you can't change them. His theory has been proven to be correct, but that little bit recently in the last 20 years has become mainstream medical science, this field called epigenetics. So in Darwin's theory, your body was like an iPhone with one app in it, and that app was all you were ever going to get. But epigenetics is a little bit like your iPhone comes with an app store with maybe, 20, 30 apps. And if you experience a long-term physical hardship or change in environment, your body can switch over to one of these other apps to make you better adapted for it. So the Yamana women in the southern tip of South America would be in the water for like 6 hours a day collecting shellfish and king crabs. The reason I know about it is because I was in the water down there diving for king crabs, and I was wearing a dry suit, and I saw these black and white photos of these women, and I was like, how do they do that? And that's probably how they do it. So if you subject your body long term to some kind of harsh physical change, adaptations can happen. So if you don't wear a lot of clothes for a long time, that kind of adaptation can happen. We're not really talking about acclimatization, because that's a faster process where you might go somewhere, go to a cold weather place for a week and acclimatise that way. This is, I think, I'm no expert on this, but it's more like, it's in between like acclimatisation and evolutionary adaptation. In the middle there is epigenetics will get your physical resilience an even greater way. But you do have to be in that physical regime for quite a long time. So maybe that's one of the ways Gina can handle the cold. By not wearing as many clothes. Don't know, it's just guessing really. And I forgot to mention, Gina is also doing YouTube recaps. So I'll put a link to her recaps after this, and she's got a different perspective, so go check them out. Duane. Okay, so you got a fish, another brown trout. That looked like an older trout to me, had a bigger head. When trout have big heads and small bodies, it's normally a sign that they live in a nutrient deficient place. Whereas I'm only thinking back, Chris's fish had a smaller head and a bigger body, so that's probably a younger fish. Maybe it's fed up somewhere else, I don't know. Chris's fish was very fat and it had egg roe, and it looked like that it was ready to spawn basically. So I was saying on the last video that there's 2 rivers either side of Chris there. Maybe they were going up a spawning river, or maybe it was just going into a little side, detour there on the way to a bigger spawning river. I don't know, but those eggs look like they were ready to pop. They taste really good, almost in a way. I think there's a similarity in fish eggs to even chicken eggs, because I guess they just have the same kind of, goodness in them. But he ate them raw. You can cook them as well. Cooking can release a little bit more you can get more nutrients out of the food if you cook it. But egg roe is probably easy to digest anyway. But certainly for things like plants, like if you cook it, you can get more energy from it. So potato, for example, if you eat raw potato, it'll taste like rubbish, go straight through you, and you won't get much benefit from it. If you cook potato, the cells break down, the whole substance undergoes a molecular change, which makes it easier to digest, so you get more energy out of it. So like a raw egg compared to a cooked egg has more calories, or your body can withdraw more calories from it. So generally, cooking food is good. And that's probably why he cooked the whole trout, because he liked cooking the trout. Whereas Duane ate a raw trout, that also works. And for the first part of evolutionary history, we're eating all raw stuff anyway. But there was I do remember reading something a long way back in our evolution, no, not too long back, our brains rapidly increased in size. And that is also the time in the fossil record when they first found charcoal and stuff. So by being able to cook our food, we could get, I think, 40% more energy out of the food, something like that. And that allowed our brains to then expand, because the brain uses a lot of energy. Like just sitting there doing nothing, your brain is like a computer. It's like when you plug your laptop in and you've got 2 hard drives on it, your battery drains faster. We've got this big hard drive sitting on top of our heads. It needs more power. Anyway, it's nice to see Duane get a trout, and it was really sad to see Duane go. I really enjoyed Duane's input to everything, really. I really enjoyed his Indigenous perspective, and he's just a very humble top bloke. I love his, he's a snowboarder. I love his little, that's the kind of thing I do, but I'm a skier. But I like his quirky little jumps. I'm always doing that kind of stuff myself. So really good to see you, Duane, and glad you're on the show. Chris, other than his fish, you can see how much the fish lifted his mood, and that can really be the case out there. Like or in any adventure, you have higher highs and lower lows. Normal everyday life is like kind of this. When you go out on an adventure, the highs are like this and the lows are like this. So that's one of the great things about going on adventures. And I tend to find when the adventure's over, like your body just dumps the memory of the hardship, and it mostly remembers those bits above the line that are highs. And that's one of the cool things about doing adventures. All right, Kate was looking for bush tucker, or bush medicine actually. So that wattle sap is a good soap when you rough it up like that. It's also used as a fish poison, and I was considering doing that, but I didn't have a suitable small pool. If you have a very slow flowing stream and it has a pool, like the size of maybe a swimming pool, a small swimming pool, you can get lots of that stuff, mush it up, and that one being a saponin deoxygenates the water and the fish will rise to the surface. But for me, there was this big lake, and there was if I ever got to a stream, it was fast flowing with no pool, so it's not really suitable for that kind of thing. The ferns, I call it the fiddlehead stage. She had a different name, I can't remember what it was. There wasn't a lot of those. So being winter, the ferns weren't really in that fiddlehead stage, because that's also a bush tucker, the fiddlehead stage of fern, and also bracken. But I wasn't able to find any of those curled over bits. You can eat them raw. They're better cooked though. They taste like rubbish. Anyway, she was crushing up and using them as treatment for cuts. Cool. Michael was proving his shelter quite nicely, and had his bath there. He was talking about, is the hot rock going to burn through the plastic? So you can boil water in a plastic bag, because when water is in contact with plastic, the plastic can't heat up past 100 degrees. So some plastics will shrink if they shrink at 100 degrees, but they won't necessarily burn through. If you chuck a hot rock straight onto plastic, if there's no water gap in between, it could melt a hole through. So you can always just chuck some other stuff down, like some rocks, some colder rocks in between the hot rock and the plastic. But I like that idea of having a bath, and that kind of thing certainly does make you feel good. Up until the time that episode finished, I was still being Stinky Man. And everyone else is going swimming a lot, hardcore. They said water was 9 degrees. So chilly, but not the end of the world, but still pretty chilly. I find that kind of thing quite uncomfortable, swimming in cold water. Cool, all right, so my stuff, stringy bark. It's fairly labour intensive getting the stringy bark off. Like, one thing I did toss up is I could make an entire shelter out of stringy bark, but it was heavy and cumbersome, and really the tarpaulin is doing the same kind of job. You can make a really nice kind of insulated thing out of stringy bark, and that is one of the olden day kind of explorers, or the people that first colonised, the second people that colonised Tasmania. They would basically go into the forest and just strip all the stringy bark out. And but obviously Aboriginal people have been using stringy bark for a long, long time. and they use it for bark canoes. So I was talking about the water content there. By being able to lever it off with your hands, it means there's enough water content in the bark that the bark is still pliable, so you can bend it into a canoe shape and it doesn't snap. Whereas if it's too dry and you can't just lever the bark off with your hands, when you try and bend it, it can just crack down the middle, and then you've wasted not only the time, but you've wasted that resource. Because a nice big stringy bark tree is a big resource, and they'd know where every tree is in their area, and they would come back to them at a certain time, and you don't want to waste any resources in the bush, and stringy bark's a great resource. So the trapping there, the paddy melon, he can obviously smell my smell, and it's hard to know whether he's sniffing my smell on the end of the trigger mechanism stake, or whether it's the freshly disturbed sap from me cutting it. So they're not put off by humans, they're more interested in it. So if there wasn't that if I hadn't disturbed that site, they probably would just, well, on the trail cam, they were hopping straight through there on that highway, as I call it. But as they get there, they're like, what's that? And then they slow down. And it's not that they're scared of me, it's just that my scent changes their behaviour. And I did just start setting the trap with gloves and stuff, but it's a lot trickier setting it with gloves, and my gloves are pretty stinky anyway, probably wouldn't make a difference. So, yeah, it's just a factor that them sniffing you out can change their behaviour when they get to your trap. Cool, so there's only 5 of us left. So looking forward to seeing episode 6. See you next time.